Within a week, two more attacks appeared, but from them the doctors learned little. On the source of Slater's visions they speculated at length, for since he could neither read nor write, and had apparently never heard of a legend or a fairy tale, his gorgeous imagery was quite inexplicable. That it could not have come from any known myth or romance was made especially clear by the fact that the unfortunate lunatic expressed himself only in his own simple manner. He raved of things he did not understand and could not interpret, things which he claimed to have experienced, but which he could not have learned through any normal or connected narration. The alienist soon agreed that the abnormal dreams were the foundation of trouble, dreams whose vividness could for a time completely dominate the waking mind of this basically inferior man. With due formality, Slater was tried for murder, acquitted on the ground of insanity, and committed to the institution wherein I held so humble a post. I have said that I consent specular concerning dream life, and from this you may judge of the eagerness with which I applied myself to the study of my new patient. As soon as I had fully ascertained the facts of his case, he seemed to sense a certain friendliness in me, born no doubt of the interest I could not conceal, and the gentile manner in which I questioned him. Not that he ever recognized me during his attacks, when I hung breathlessly upon his chaotic but cosmic words pictures, but he knew me in his quiet hours, when he would sit with his barred windows, weaving baskets of straw and willow, and perhaps pinning him for some mountain freedom he could never again enjoy. His family never called to see him. Probably it had found an other temporary head, after the manner of descent mountain folk. By degrees I commenced to feel an overwhelming wonder at the mad and fantastic conceptions of Joe Slater. The man himself was pitiably inferior in mentality and language alike, but his glowing titanic visions, though described in barbaric, disjointed jargon, were assuredly things which only superior or even exceptional brain could conceive. How I often asked myself, could the stolid imagination of this Catskill degenerate conjure up such sights whose very possessions argued a lurking spark of genius? How could any backwoods dullard have gained so much of an idea of these glimmering realms of supernal radiance and space about which Slater ranted in his fervorless delirium? More and more I inclined to the belief that in the pitiful personality who cringed before me lay the disordered nucleus of something beyond my comprehension, something infinitely beyond the comprehension of my more experienced but less imaginative medical and scientific colleagues. I'm going to save that as another part. And yet I could extract nothing definite from the man. The sum of all my investigation was then a kind of semi-corporeal dream life. Slater wandered or floated around this resplendent, prodigious valleys, meadows, gardens, cities, and palaces of light, in a region unbound and unknown to man. That there was no peasant or degenerate, but a creature of importance and vivid life, moving proudly and dominantly, and checked only by the certain deadly enemy, who seemed to be a being of visible yet ethereal structure, and who did not appear to be of any human shape, since Slater never referred to it as a man, or as aught save the thing. This thing had done Slater some hideous but unnamed wrong, which the maniac, if maniac he were, yearned to avenge. From the manner in which Slater alluded to their dealings, I judged that he and this luminous thing had met on equal terms, that his dream existence, the man, was himself a luminous thing, of the same race of bleh. Okay, I gotta reread that part. I judged that he and the luminous thing had met on equal terms, that in this dream existence the man in himself was a luminous thing of the same race as his enemy. This impression was sustained by his frequent references to flying through space and burning all that impeded his progress. Yet these conceptions were formulated in rustic words, wholly inadequate to convey them. a circumstance which drove me to the conclusion that if a dream world indeed existed, oral language was not its medium for the transition of thought. Could it be that the dream soul inhabiting this inferior body was desperately struggling to speak to things which the simple and halting tongue of dullness could not utter? Could it be that I was face to face with intellectual emanations which would explain the mystery if I could but learn to discover and read them? I did not tell the older physicians any of these things, for middle age is skeptical, cynical, and declined to accept new ideas. Besides, the head of the institution had declined to accept these new ideas, but lately warned me in his fraternal way that I was overworking, that my mind needed rest. It had long been my belief that human thought consists basically of atomic and molecular motion, convertible into either waves or radiant energy, like heat, light, or electricity. This belief had early led me to contemplate the possibility of telepathy or mental communication by means of suitable apparatus, and I had, in my college days, prepared a set of transmitting and receiving instruments somewhat similar to cumbrous devices employed in wireless telegraphy, I think it's called, at that crude pre-radio period. These I had tested with a fellow student, but achieving no result, had soon packed them away with other scientific odds and ends for possible future use. Now, in my intense desire to probe this dream life of Joe Slater, I sought these instruments again and spent several days in repairing them for action. When they were complete once more, I missed no opportunity for their trial. At each outburst of Slater's violence, I would fit the transmitter onto his forehead and receiver to my own, constantly making delicate adjustments for various hypnothetical wavelengths of intellectual energy. I had but a little notion of how the thought impressions would, if successfully conveyed, arouse an intelligent response in my brain, but I felt certain that I could detect and interpret them. Accordingly, I continued my experiments, though informing no one of their nature. It was on the 21st of February, 1901, that the thing occurred. As I look back across the years, I realize how unreal it seems, and sometimes wonder if old Dr. Fenton was not right when he charged it all to my excited imagination. I recall that he listened to with great kindness and patience when I told him, but afterward gave me this nerve powder and arranged for the half-year's vacation on which I departed the next week. That fateful night I was wildly agitated and perturbed, for, despite the excellent care he had received, Joe Slater was unmistakably dying. Perhaps it was his mountain freedom that he missed, or perhaps the turmoil in his brain has grown too acute for his rather sluggish physique. But, at all events, the flame of vitality flickered low in his decadent body. He was drowsy near the end, and as darkness fell, he dropped off into a troubled sleep. I did not strap on the straitjacket as was customary when he slept, since I saw that he was too feeble to be dangerous, and even if he woke in a mental disorder once more before passing away, but I did place upon his head and mine the two ends of my cosmic radio, hoping against hope for the first and last message from the dream world in the brief time remaining. Oh, in the cell with us was one nurse, a mediocre fellow who did not understand the purpose of the apparatus, or think to inquire into my course. As the hours wore on, I saw his head droop awkwardly into sleep, but I did not disturb him. I myself, lulled by the rhythmic beating of my healthy and the dying man, must have nodded a little later. The sound of weird lyric melody was what aroused me. Chords, vibrations, and harmonic ecstasies echoed passionately on every hand, while on my ravished sight burst a stupendous spectacle of ultimate beauty. Walls, columns of architraves of living fire blazed effulgently around the spot where I seemed to float in air, extending upward to an infinitely high vaulted dome of indescribable splendor blending in with the display of palatable magnificence, or rather, supplanting it at times in a kaleidoscopic rotation, were glimpses of wide plains and graceful valleys, high mountains, and inviting grottos, covered with every lovely attribute of scenery which has delighted my eyes could conceive of, yet formed wholly of some glowing ethereal plastic entity consistency partook of which inconsistency partook as much of spirit as of matter. As I gazed, I perceived that my own brain had held the key to enchanting metronomes, for each vista which appeared to me was the one my changeling mind would most wish to behold. Amidst this Elysian realm I dwell not as a stranger, for each sight and sound was familiar to me, just as it had been for uncounted eons of eternity before, and would be for like eternities to come.